Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Brett McDermott, and this is the DBT podcast. That stands for Doing Big Things. And every week we speak with high performers from around the world that are doing big things, and we find out what habits, systems, and mindset are allowing them to move forward with their lives in a powerful way. As always, I don't want you to try and apply everything you learn. What I ask is that you find one piece of advice that really speaks to you and you put it into action today. I am super pumped today because I get to sit down with a man that has been a mentor and a friend of mine for a long time. He rose through the ranks of New York City real estate to become one of the top grossing agents in the city. He then turned his eyes towards coaching and leadership, where he now serves as the director of sales for one of Manhattan's highest ranking brokerages, Elegran Real Estate. We're going to dive into how he himself grew a thriving business and what he has learned from coaching and leading so many ultra successful people. Ben Willig, thanks for being with us today, brother.
Brett, it's so special for me to be here and do this. So it means a lot that you asked me to do this, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't be happier than to be sitting across from you virtually, of course. Let's rewind a little bit to the beginning of your story. You were grinding in a corporate finance job right out of college. At some point, you decided that running your own business as a real estate agent may be more enticing. What exactly led to the decision of leaving the finance position and taking a stab at entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I was young, dumb, and stupid and overly cocky and a young man, so it seemed like the right thing to do. No, if I'm being honest, to back it up, being in the finance role, for me, I love that I had some great experiences. I had a great boss that I learned a lot from. The guy who was my direct mentor was a Harvard business grad, White House fellow, Army Ranger, iBanker for Goldman Sachs. I mean, you name it, this guy had done it. So the learning experience that I got right off the bat was incredible. And there were some parts to it that I was doing that were actually like brokering when I only reflected and looked back, that were, I did actually really enjoy. What I didn't love at that point was, at that point in my life, is feeling like I was capped, income wise, not necessarily having the flexibility that I wanted to. And really, I think just wanted to let my wings fly a bit. And it was during as things were starting to turn with the recession, and I had some friends who hadn't really got off the ground yet after, college. And so we kind of got together and started forming, on a very, very small scale, what we do today, just kind of like a mini brokerage. Friends starting a business, not knowing what we were doing was not a good recipe for success. But it was a lot of learning experiences with that. It was a lot of fun having our own name and all that sort of stuff, and ultimately ended up buying my first piece of property then. And, but eventually realized that I was just loving it. My heart was drawn to it. And once I finally did get into brokerage with Anchor, which was our former firm, that just, I was in a place where I could really thrive. And albeit having offers to go back to the corporate world, I was just really, really enjoying brokerage and having your own business and doing all that. So.
Excellent. And what would you say, what advice would you give to someone that's maybe listening right now? They're in the position you were in. They don't love the flexibility of their current position. They feel like their income is kind of capped to an extent. What would you say to someone that's considering giving entrepreneurship a shot?
Yeah. So, I probably have a bit of a different view than when I first started. I think, in terms of entrepreneurship, we need to back that up 1 second further. And everybody is so different and so unique. And even when you and I, started, you were 1 foot in entrepreneurship, one foot out, and you kind of had to be that for a little bit as you were getting things started off. And, some people need the basic needs and safeties met in Maslow's hierarchy. And there's a certain amount of income we all kind of need to survive. And some people, with what they enjoy from a day-to-day basis, my wife, Lindsay, is a great example of this. She thrives still on Wall Street, and she's outstanding at what she does and loves doing it, and all that. So I think people need to ask themselves, where are you at in life? What are you passionate about? What are you uniquely talented at? Because a lot of times we're passionate about things, or we might be passionate about being an entrepreneur, but maybe it's not also where our skill sets lie. Some people take hobbies and then make them into careers, but then realize that maybe what they enjoy doing on a work day-to-day basis is different than what they enjoy with that hobby. So because those sometimes don't always line up, I think you really want to give this a strong consideration. And, why are you doing everything? And what is that true passion and that true calling that you have? I think if someone goes through that process with hopefully someone that can kind of coach them along with it a little bit, and they decide that, yeah, I'm just ready to break out, I want to get into, this entrepreneurship thing, then, there are a lot of benefits to it. You are uncapped. The sky is the limit. You can set your freedom and flexibility. What I tell a lot of kids who've come to me out of school and started their careers with it is, look, the first couple of years are going to be the hardest. You're not going to make as much of your friends in salaried positions, but you're going to appreciate the value of a dollar. And you're probably going to be earning more by the time you're 2-3 years into that journey if you've been working hard and you're successful with it. And I find those people who are just given things from day one maybe don't appreciate things quite as much as when you really have to grind and work for it. So you could build those passive income streams. I've reviewed a lot of tax returns just because of the nature of this job, and most of the people with a large net worth have started businesses, so it is a phenomenal path to wealth and long-term wealth. But it is also not the only path. So I don't want to, also sit here and bash, going a corporate route. My family has a bit of both, and it is nice to actually have some of that stability too. So understand where you're at, understand where your why is. And if it is the entrepreneurship route, make sure you still have great coaching and great mentorship, and that you have people that want to see you succeed. So, I made the mistake early on of being a little bit too much in isolation with it, was unsuccessful. And when I had the right environment and coaching and structure, really allowed me to thrive. So
I love that. And so important, right? To step back. What are my passions? What are my skills? Where do those two intersect? And at the same point, you cannot undervalue the importance of a great coach, a great mentor that's going to show you the way.
That's what I've seen, from my experience, and I'm sure there's some studies to back it up. So
I'd say so. I don't have any to reference on me right now, but maybe we'll put them in the notes of the podcast when we publish this bad boy. And we're still kind of looking back here at the Ben Willig journey. Ultra successful agent, consistently the top guy at Anchor Associates brokerage, leading a team, generating millions of dollars of revenue on a yearly basis. What would you say were the main tactics, the main habits that were key to your success as an agent?
So, success is not that sexy in my opinion, or at least it hasn't been for me. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because we live in a world where a lot of things can be sensationalized. And I think if there's anything that should be rewarding or uplifting for people to hear, is that I'm not really that good at any one thing. I'm just really good at doing a lot of things really consistently over time, and being okay making mistakes at all of them consistently over time. So I think, that consistency is really, really key, because people fall off quite a bit. And the other thing is, I think as I've gone through this journey and when I was an agent and doing all of that, for me, what really changed things for me was it was 2, 3, 4, 5 times more of a personal journey and getting things right in my own life than it was, professional journey. Seeing how it changed, my life, just made me that much more motivated to learn and consume, more, and be a better advisor, and, work harder in the business, with those different things. So I've always tried to be a sponge for learning, again, whether it's for myself and being introspective. I think it was Socrates who said, the unexamined life is not one worth living. And at the same time, always trying to learn and consume information for your craft to better you at that. And, I, you know, going all the way back to my football days or swimming days, like I was never the best at anything to start off with. Kids laughed me off the field my first year in football, and then I just did twice as many workouts as all of them in the off season, and then became a starter and got recruited for college. So I could just outwork everybody over a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same was kind of true for for real estate. Is just early mornings, late nights, doing everything I possibly can, and just doing that really, really consistently, over time. So.
I love that. You really are the jack of all trades, the consistent Swiss Army knife of the real estate industry. I mean, you're like the Swiss Army knife you can always count on. If you need it, it's there, and it can probably help you in like 17 different ways.
Yeah, well, and these days with like managing and how much I've been coaching and managing, when I have to pull my agent Swiss Army knife, it probably still got a little rust on it.
You touched on work ethic there, and I just think that I don't want to like really glaze over that. Work ethic is kind of at the beating heart of any really high performer and their system for achievement. Have you always been a really hard worker, or was this kind of a skill that you had to teach yourself over time?
So from the time I was 5 years old, I've competed. So I started in competitive swimming when I was 5 years old, and then basketball, and then played football in college. And so I've always been one to compete. I'm also a little bit of a, health nerd of sort on the side. So I actually have something called the warrior gene, and I'd love to actually see how many top producers have this as well. When properly honed, it can be kind of a great motivator. I don't think that's the only thing, or you need to have it. But I definitely, just naturally love competition with myself. In my later life, I've really reconnected with having, marathons in the calendar and things like that, just to have some type of goal to, to strive for. So just the natural element of competition and pushing yourself to the limit and seeing what you can do. Just to compete was not the reason why I did things. For me, it was really for my family, and that was more of the inspiration rather than motivation for me, because I think motivation is a little more temporary. But that just innate nature to always push yourself and be the best you could be and see how far you can push everything just has always kind of been there. It's been a part of my DNA. I've been doing it for so long. And I do find in coaching a lot of top producers that most people just kind of have it. I spend most of my time with top producers trying to coach them off the ledge a little bit more, because they're so critical on themselves, and actually trying to have them take time, for themselves. So it is definitely something that there are some people who just have it. Now, that said, there are also, I've seen a lot of people who maybe didn't or lost their way, and there might be someone listening that says, I'm not like that. I haven't competed my whole life. And how do I connect with that? And what I would say for that is I've seen people, once they really connect to their why, like we talked about a little earlier, sometimes I think that's the spark and the fire that, really ignites that. And just trying to get a little bit better every day. Once you compound things on top over time, and certain things become habits, then eventually they're going to become second nature for, really, I think, any person. So I've had those habits ingrained for a long time, but I do think they can be built too. So
I love that. And I think that's totally true, right? Some people are just born with this incredible work ethic, and they are just ready to go from the second they come out of the womb. And then some people have to work on it a little bit. I know myself, I'm someone that's kind of had to develop work ethic. I don't think it's something I innately had. I was kind of coddled as a child, to be honest with you. I was an only child and was spoiled from the get-go. And I really think that it's a quality I've had to somewhat build in myself, over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think, like you said, it comes down to connecting to your why, knowing why you're getting up early and doing what you need to do.
Yeah. And if I can interject there for a moment, because you and I have had a close relationship for such a long time, and I do, know you so well. And I really try and learn from everybody. If you're not learning from people you're coaching, like there's a mistake there. And, you've really taught me a lot as well in terms of how you're, how you're wired with all that. And I've seen your motivation and your drive just continue to build and continue to pick up. And it's definitely been one of those things that, again, it's those little changes, life circumstances happen, a little bit more motivation, layered on top. You see the positive benefits, and positive addiction can be just as addicting as any other addiction. And, you make those changes and it really just builds over time. So I really think you've been a wonderful example of that. And it's been a lot of fun for me to be, on a good chunk of that journey with you. So
I appreciate that, my man. I really do. So now, we've kind of talked about your agent success. I want to kind of fast forward to what you're doing now. You're coaching, you're managing, you're guiding some really ultra successful people on a regular basis at Elegran Real Estate. Now we're talking about agents. Some of them are generating over $1 million in revenue annually by themselves. I mean, that's no small feat. That's a big deal in business. When you talk about $1 million businesses, a lot of times you're talking about, pretty large operations. There's real estate agents that you're coaching that are doing it pretty much on their own, which is pretty insane when you think about it. What have you seen as some consistent commonalities, some consistent traits or habits between the top producers that you coach?
Yeah, first of all, I feel very, very blessed and very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. And it really is these agents who make it happen. Again, a lot of them are just kind of, born like this. So I try and learn from them, just as much. And I still feel like I have a lot, to learn in this category. But, I think to share some of the things that I see with them is, what I think I kind of hit on a little while ago, the ability to make mistakes and not get discouraged is so huge. And if I was going to really draw, parallels to people who, get off the path a little bit occasionally, I think it's easy to talk about, but it's another thing to have happen and really do in practice. Like I have a great agent who's on my team, and, she called me up, and this is actually this morning, and I just think the world of her. She's amazing. She's grown her business by 40 to 100% every year since she's been in the business. Exudes a lot of great leadership qualities, but, had a client do a really unfortunate, thing, and it really got to her and, discouraged. And we eventually, throughout the course of the conversation, she knew that she was looking at it as something to be thankful for and as a blessing because of what she was going to learn, from it. But, we all naturally react sometimes to these things because that's what the body wants to do. And some people will get derailed for a much longer period of time than others. But if you can get, to a place where you make a mistake, you misfire on a marketing thing, you lost money on something, any type of failure, you kind of have like a yes attitude and wow, that's great. Like I learned what not to do. So now I'm going to try something else. And the quicker you can just move to pivoting and trying something else, those are the types of people, call it perseverance, call it grit. The ability to take those things, in stride, I think is one of the biggest things that really sticks out for me as I'm coaching folks.
I love that. Just the ability to consistently make mistakes, learn from them quickly, and then start taking action again. And I think that's huge. It really is. So many of us sometimes make a mistake. We overthink it. It keeps us from taking action for a long time. When if we can just train ourselves to, almost be happy with a mistake, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing, and then take it internally. What did I do wrong? What can I learn? What can I change next time this comes up? And just consistently enter that loop when you make a mistake seems to be, pretty key when it comes to doing big things in this world.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
So you're meeting with these big time agents, big time producers, people that definitely have got a lot going for them. What type of mindset, do you take into a meeting with someone who's already performing at such a high level? Some of these agents probably feel like they've kind of got things figured out a little bit. If they're generating, $700,000 a year, $1 million in revenue, whatever it is, how do you approach coaching high performers?
Yeah, I thought about that. I've thought about that a lot over the last, I'd say even 6 months to a year or so, and then was thinking about it, again coming into this because I, knew it would kind of be asked. I think part of it is, having been in their shoes, is helpful for me to just kind of be able to take that step. But in looking back, that might have been helpful for me just in the beginning to get over my own insecurities or fears, to be honest, coaching, people who do a lot. A lot of people see people doing these things and they project what they think about stuff, but everybody is just people at the end of the day. Whether you have a zero or many zeros after your bank account or name, and everybody is trying to get to somewhere, and it's not always the same place, and it's not what you project, right? It's if one person wants to have $10 million and they see this person doing these things, like that person who's doing some of these big things, they might just be having to pay off some different things so they could have more time with their family, or maybe they just want more business coming in than they have. And everybody has their challenges. And so I think what it comes down to is when I go into any conversation, I'm seeking to understand and really meet someone where they're at, and truly see and understand like what makes them tick, where did they come from, where are they now, where do they want to go, those kind of three things. And same thing what we do in the real estate business in terms of brokering. I tell this to my son all the time: if you help other people get what they want, you'll have more than enough of what you want. And so understanding what each one of these top producers is trying to get and what they want, and provide them the tools or provide them the coaching and resources. I mean, and it's unfortunately, it's not a one size fits all. There's no one playbook, which is why I'm so insatiable about learning different things. I have one of my $1 million producers who I'm doing workout plans for him, right now. And that's been one of the most hugely helpful things in his life. I have other ones that I'm building out key performance metric charts, and other ones that go to coaching workshops. And you and I review weekly and quarterly plans. So, depending on what someone is trying to do, the solution is different. So you need to seek to understand, meet someone where they're at, understand where they've been, where they are, and where they want to go. So.
I love that. There's no one size fits all to being a great coach. And you certainly take that methodology into your approach. Now, you're the director of sales at a company that's done over $6 billion in sales. This is a big time role that demands results. Which of your character traits or habits do you think have allowed you to be such an effective leader?
Yeah. So leadership is a word that I do not take lightly. And because of that, is something that I have read, studied, listened to more, on maybe that topic than many other things. And the more I read and know and experience with it, the more of a novice I feel like I am, and the more I want to learn and grow from other great leaders. So I still feel like there's a tremendous amount to go. But if I was to mention some of the things that I've learned and experienced that I think are important, I think I'll rattle off a bunch.
Please
but,
rattle them off. Listen, Ben, you're one of the best leaders I know. I'd love to know what makes you so effective at leading people.
Yeah. And so I think first is I've always been true to myself. So I'm very comfortable in my own skin. I'm not going to try and ever pretend to be someone I'm not. So, first and foremost, be yourself, whatever you and whatever your style is, just do you. You don't have to, there's people you can admire to be a better version of yourself, but still be yourself. Have empathy. So really try and understand where people are at. And I really try and be very intuitive and try and feel where people are at with things. And, one of the things, one of my great leaders who I really admire, and was one of my coaches over the years, when I spoke to him as I was stepping into this role, he said, your people should always know. He's like, you might have to give them tough love and do different things, but they should always know that you have their back and that you would go to war with them. And I think if you asked anybody who works with me, I've never even asked or gone around or to ask this question, but I would venture to guess and guarantee that every single person on my team knows that I would go to war 110% and have their back. And I think people, really appreciate that. Vulnerability is another huge one. I would just reference Brene Brown and Dare to Lead, and she has so many great teachings, on that. And the more I've leaned into my own, vulnerability, the easier many conversations have been. Now that we have such a talented team of very smart people around me at Elegran, like our management team is incredible. I find myself asking more questions in meetings and trying to understand, more things. A leader's not a person who comes in the room and I think barks orders. So if you, talk a much smaller percentage and listen to other people and ask questions in those settings, it's, probably better. And so therefore you're really genuinely trying to learn. So you really, want to be learning as much as possible, learning from yourself, learning outside. I have podcasts on most mornings when I'm doing my runs, unless I'm running fast and I have my music. And so one of the other things when I stepped into leadership is I also just admitted when I didn't know something. So I think sometimes people can feel like they need to be the central source of answers, and you don't. People are going to appreciate if you just say, I don't know that. And you know what? I've even flipped that to now getting excited when I see things that I don't know, because then it's an opportunity to learn. So, and you also want to be very positive on the future, not in a BS type of way, but, genuinely try and find what are the good parts, what are the opportunities in the business. People can sniff through BS, but you got to generally be a positive person and have a good outlook, practicing gratitude, and also praising publicly, criticize in private. I see a lot of leaders make this mistake. And they say, some things with a big group of people that they probably should have just said to someone, separately. And I could go into a lot of the science, but, at Anchor, when stepping into what I did, I did something bold, and I've then since been reinforced with a lot of scientific studies surrounding this, and it's just paid off in dividends for me. And that is really focusing on the wins. It's very easy for humans and top performers to focus on what's wrong or what they need to improve upon, but focusing on the wins, putting on the highlight tape. There are so many of the greatest coaches and so much science and psychology behind this and how it can propel just an organization. It's not intuitive and it's not necessarily what everyone does, but it has paid off in dividends, for me with what we do to really focus on what's gone well. And, how can we either take those transferable skills and, apply it to our challenges, or how can we use those to inspire other people and get good conversations going and really kick that, sort of positive momentum for the business and people. So.
Wow. Leadership masterclass at the 27-minute mark of the podcast there. That was unbelievable.
And I still feel like I have more to learn.
That was unbelievable, Ben Willig. I think I just learned more about leadership in the last 3 minutes than I knew in my first 37 years of life. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good. Really awesome. No, your people need to know that you've got their back and that you would go to war with them. And being someone who's worked underneath you, been in companies where you're a leader, I can assure you everyone that has ever worked with you feels that way about you, Ben, 100%.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, we talked about your work ethic, your world-class legendary work ethic before. And I've even called you the machine, I think, to your face a few times, just because, you're the first guy in the office. You're laser focused. You've really got the work ethic part of your game under control. But, of course, you're not a machine, you're a man. And I'm sure just like anyone else, maybe less than others, but to an extent, you must feel resistance to work sometimes, to doing all the things you should be doing, getting up and hammering out the to-do list. There's got to be some days you wake up and you go, I just want to go for a walk. I don't want to do all these things I know I should be doing. And if so, what self-talk do you use, or how do you fight through the resistance to work and continue to take massive action on a daily basis?
So I think this actually ties back to the why and why you're doing something. And I've been blessed to work hard enough early on where I'm in a position where I get to do things because I'm driven by impact, and I know that I'm impacting agents' lives, which impacts clients' lives, and able to have this massive impact. And with that ability to have massive impact comes the sense of duty. And I know that other people are reliant on me to be in my best place. And so with all of that, I love what I'm doing. And, the first thing with that, sort of resistance to work is, yeah, sure, I might have resistance to work, but I don't feel like what I'm doing is work. I feel like what I'm doing is my calling and my duty. And I've been through near death instances and feel like I'm being kept on this earth to make the lives of others around me a better place. And so I wake up, just more inspired on a daily basis because of my great team, because of the great agents who are working incredibly hard, that I need to be the best I can be so that, they can get everything they need from me. So, to be honest, I don't feel resistance to work because I don't feel like I work. I feel like I am just doing what my higher calling and my duty, in this world is. And so that's like a very different thing than just like feeling like you need to, to go to work, so to speak. So.
Sure. So really tap into your why, do your best to find meaning in your work, and you probably won't feel as much resistance to it.
I think so. Purpose is huge. There's a book that you could probably link called Ikigai, and in Japanese, there's no word for retirement in Japanese. The most closely relatable word is Ikigai, which means purpose, and what's your purpose and meaning. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about that and going through it, and I feel like every day is filled with purpose, and I feel blessed and have fun doing what I do every day. So there's no resistance with that. You're really being pulled by inspiration in those cases. So.
For sure. And I really do feel like when I see you communicate with myself or others that you are there to listen, you're there to lift others up, and that you really do find great meaning in your work. Do you at a certain point in the day every day, or like, is there a practice that you have to tap into your why? Maybe your walk to the office, do you think about the meaning of your work? Is there any type of practice, I guess is what I'm getting at, that you really remind yourself of your why, of why you find your work so fulfilling? Or is it just kind of intrinsically inside of you? Is there any type of thought process that really reminds you of your why on a daily basis?
So I think there's three things. I don't know how much time we have or how much you want to limit me, but
please. Well, the last tangent you went on was, leadership, master class that's probably going to get like 10,000 views on Instagram. So I'd say you can feel free to go off.
So there's three things I think that people could hone this type of, well, two particularly where you could hone the craft, and one that was just meaningful for me in my life that was an experience that can't be taken away, and I hope doesn't have to be recreated for other people. But the two practical things of the three are, yearly and quarterly goal setting and actually workshopping through. There are very specific ways to work through your why. There's a great exercise, and maybe you and I have been through it before, I can't remember, where you start with what you want to accomplish, and then you actually you go why and write that out, and why, and then why do you want to accomplish that thing, write that out. And you do that basically 3 or 4 times, combine that with some goal setting and SMART goals and things like that, and you can really hone in both business and personal goals in that way, reviewing that on a quarterly basis. And then on a daily basis, I think practicing gratitude. When I wake up with my kids every day, I tell them, and so if I tell them, I should tell other people. It's hard to feel sad if you have an attitude of gratitude. So before they watch their show every morning, and I've been doing it since they were very small. I ask them, hey, what are we appreciative of today? And we all go around as a family and talk about at least one thing that we're, appreciative of. So really starting the day with gratitude. So those, I think, are like the very practical things you can do on a daily, a quarterly, a yearly basis. But then going back to what I was talking about for, sort of higher calling, I've had, 2 near deaths in my life. So my first one was in high school with the basketball. I nailed heads with a kid and skull fracture and brain hemorrhage, and doctors told my dad I wasn't going to make it through the night. I'm ultimately still here. That, near death kind of, I had a wake up call and just kind of epiphany. I think when you have these things that I think I thought I was invincible before then, and that had me appreciate how fragile human life is. And then I had a second back in 2014 where I was hit by a bus on the way to work on a city bike. And the doctors in the hospital told my wife and I that the helmet I was wearing saved my life. And going through that, experience and recovery and things like that, and just where I was in life at a different point, I really felt deep down, and it's hard to explain the feeling that I was being kept on earth to give the gifts that I've been able to have in my life. Because at that point, I had a great family environment, very financially set. I had a great team. I built a lot. And so then to be able to give that to other people and for them to enrich their lives, again, that really having that greater level of impact, that's what I was kind of referencing in terms of the higher duty, higher calling. And for me, I just try and fulfill that every day. And, I think it's, again, my duty to kind of make the people's lives better around me. So
I love that. And I really love that gratitude practice that you do with your children. I think a lot of podcasts and self-help gurus will talk about the importance of a morning gratitude practice. But I think when you're doing it on your own and you're just writing, in your journal what you're grateful for, it's easy to kind of fall off and do it for a few days and then not do it for a month and then jump back in. But the fact that you do it with your children, there's kind of like a social aspect to it. They almost hold you accountable to that practice and probably helps you to be so much more consistent with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. There are a lot of mornings where I gotta pull from them, and I'm thankful for my lovey. Can I have my show now? But it definitely pays off.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes we're grateful.
As it seems, but I work at it every day with them. So
sure, listen, and sometimes we're grateful for our health, and sometimes we're grateful for our lovey, and that's okay. That is okay. So back to just your relationships with your agents and just coaching. So many business owners. I think it's always fascinating to talk with someone like yourself who interacts with so many business owners. It's pretty rare. And we've touched on, what you see as some of the more common positive traits in high performers. But I want to kind of talk about the flip side. And what do you see as the most common trait that holds people back from realizing their true potential?
What holds people back? So I think we all have belief systems, and this is a big thing in coaching. And to be very fair, like I have my own belief systems right now. Everything that I've prescribed to you is my belief system at the moment. And they might be helpful belief systems that have helped me get to this point. And we all, even though self-reflection is good, and I know this might sound a little contradictory from some things I said earlier, as human beings, we would never get out of bed or never move from our bedroom if we constantly thought about every single little thing that we do in our lives. So what do we have to do as humans to get out the door and get on with our lives? Well, we have to compartmentalize. We have to create some belief systems about certain ways in which the world works. I turn the shower to the left, it gets hot or cold, whatever the case might be, right? So some of these things are very, very necessary. Some belief systems that maybe have gotten us to a certain point might not be what gets us to the next point. And breaking down those belief systems and building new empowering stories for where someone actually wants to get to in the future, I think are really cool, because ultimately belief systems are all just BS, right? Belief systems.
There you go.
So everybody has them. They are necessary. And a lot of times they could just be very limiting, beliefs, and trying to challenge yourself. I constantly try and challenge what I'm thinking. And I love when I hear someone say something and I change my mind about a strongly held belief, that I maybe once had and now I loosely hold or I've changed my mind on. So if you can, if you're going to challenge other people, you should also challenge yourself. And what belief systems do you have or put into place that are maybe holding you back from, where you want to be? And so I can, from afar as a coaching position, really listen and hear like, oh man, this person has this story going on in their head about how these things should be. Like, we got to change this story here and get a new empowering story in place to really change this up. So I'd say that tends to be the biggest thing, and have spent a lot of time working on that with people. So.
Sure. Like, I love it. Belief systems, because they're BS, right? You can always build a new one, tear down an old one. And I think a lot of us do. We've got these belief systems that are holding us back from maybe going for that big, crazy, outrageous goal that maybe we should be going for. And it takes a good mentor, a good coach to kind of spot that weak spot, start deconstructing that belief system, and then building a new one in its place. So, Ben, you always bring so much authenticity, so much positivity. I mean, you're a guy that just has confidence kind of oozing out of his pores. Something tells me that the inner dialogue that Ben Willig has with himself is of a healthy variety. So I just want to talk about self-talk for a moment. Are there any phrases or questions that you consistently direct towards yourself to consistently stay in peak state?
Yeah, well, I think, what's really important for people to realize is that the mind is a muscle. And, this is something funny I've integrated into some of our trainings, is that, you wouldn't go on a date with someone on Saturday night and tell them like, oh, don't worry, I brushed my teeth on Monday. Like, I'm fine, even though I haven't brushed my teeth in 5 or 6 days. Right?
I'd hope not. I would hope not.
Most people wouldn't. Yeah, right. But what is the most complex muscle we have? And that's our mind. Yet people leave that to atrophy, so many times. So let's not even call it self-talk, but, who do you have, or what influences do you have in your life? So, the podcast, for example, that I get in on my run on a daily basis, I have negative doubt and, self-talk and things enter and creep in all the time. But, that practice of having those great influences or things like this come in on a daily basis, it's like brushing your teeth every day. A few that it really depends where I'm at in life, or what training cycle, or what's going on at work, and what things will really hit and ring to me. And it changes, honestly, on a weekly basis. I think some consistent ones that stick out to me, over the years. One recently that was on my last marathon, that I think would be great to link to, is there's like a 2-minute video online of Jocko Willenick's good speech. And it's like, hey, when something goes wrong, good, opportunity to get better. It's such a cool, empowering speech. And I popped that in at any struggling point in my last marathon. Some things during a very influential time in my life during high school football. My high school football coaches used to have a couple sayings that, at some point always just creep in my back end operating system. And, some of them are, don't talk about it, be about it, and don't feel sorry for yourself. No one feels sorry for you. And then, one that I love from my mom, so really taking it to the family side of things, that I feel comes into play so much in our business, and I think just in life in general, is, getting upset and expecting someone else to change is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I just love, that it's so applicable for so many different things. So I could probably go on with sayings, but I think it's just important to have those positive influences. Again, it's like the daily brushing of the teeth for me. So
I love that, man. That is excellent. And really quickly, you touched on just now listening to podcasts and learning on a daily basis. And that I'm also a believer in lifelong learning. I think that if you look at the great achievers on this planet, they are committed to learning on a weekly basis, whether it be a book, an audiobook, a podcast, going to conferences, whatever it is. I know for myself, when I look back at the biggest steps I've taken in my life, it's usually some type of event or a book that I can honestly point to as the reason it happened in one way, shape, or form. Would you say there's maybe one book or one conference or one event that kind of speaks to you as the most influential in your life?
Yes. So I'll go with, the book one is going to be challenging, because I think that really depends where people are at. The conference, that's easier. If you have never been to a Tony Robbins UPW 4-day event, it's a special thing. I think anybody, even if Tony Robbins isn't your long-term thing, it's worth going to. I've been to 4 of them myself, highly impactful for me. And, just a lot of the people I've followed, because on day 4 of those, he actually brings in other experts, have actually been a product of, that event as well. Uh, book. Wow. There's so many. I think some of the early ones that are still some of my favorites are like any book by Jim Collins. So Good to Great, Great by Choice. In terms of, some business books, I'd say Rich Dad, Poor Dad with, investing. The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker is a great one for practicing that, that sort of gratitude and things like that. I could probably keep going on the book category. So it really, like, whenever anyone asks me the book thing, it's really like, where are you at and what are you trying to overcome? Just Listen is a fantastic book. So depending on what people are trying to solve for, because I could recommend something, but if it's not what that person needs at that point, it's not going to have that impactful nature that you kind of spoke to. And I'd say podcasters that I cycle and listen to through, Tim Ferriss has been one of my longtime, favorites. These days, I've been listening to a lot of Peter Attia is probably my next. Mostly I listen to him more now than Ferriss. And then I cycle through usually 1 or 2 more. Jocko Willenick has been just, even in the last month, something I've listened a lot to. But in the past, like Dave Asprey, and there's a few others too. So
I love it. And I'm so happy you mentioned Tony Robbins. And, even if you're not necessarily a big woo-woo, rah-rah guy, I think anyone could take something from those 4-day seminars. I mean, he's a remarkable speaker, a remarkable presenter. It's not all fluff in the clouds. There's some down in the dirt stuff that you can apply. And I just think that you walk out of that so on fire with so much emotion in your body that you can make the changes in your life that you maybe have been waiting to make for the last 5 to 10 years. I know for myself, went to a Tony Robbins event. It was definitely the first step towards me deciding to stop drinking. And I haven't had a drink in 4 years now. And that's been huge for my health and productivity and just really going after the things in life that are important for me. And actually, kind of embarrassingly enough, almost as important, Tony Robbins was also huge in me quitting fantasy football, which was the biggest distraction in my life. I mean, I'm telling you, for 4 months a year, fantasy football was my full-time job, and whatever the hell else I was doing was part-time. And it was an addiction. I was addicted to it. I was addicted to the betting aspect of it. And I knew it was holding me back because it was really taking over my focus for 4.5 months a year. Went to that Tony Robbins conference. He had a full 2-hour segment on what are the things that are holding you back? What is grabbing your focus that doesn't deserve your focus? And it just spoke to me. I walked out of that conference. I texted the guys. I said, guys, I'm out. They were shocked. They were ticked off, but eventually they accepted it. And I got to be honest with you, walking away from that silly little game that took up all my focus was one of the best things I ever could have done.
I would agree with that. I watched you before and after, and I could have told you 100 times before to fantasy football. But hey, if you got it from Tony Robbins, I'm just happy. I realized that the first time I ever played fantasy football when I was like 15, I was like, "Whoa, I will become way too all-consumed with this," and I think I never played it again. So. Good man,
good man. I'm glad you didn't walk that path. I walked it for 20 years, and it was 20 years, 20 years too long. So this has been just a phenomenal talk. I know anyone that is listening is going to really walk away with something important that they can implement in their lives. But here's the question that I love to finish on. And I'm sure there's some people out there that have some big dreams in their minds and in their heart, but they have not been taking action towards it. For whatever reason, they feel stuck. How do they get unstuck?
Well, how do you eat an elephant?
I don't know. You tell me. That's why I had you on the show.
One bite at a time. So, the beautiful thing about what you were just mentioning with Tony Robbins is that, once you've made that change, and it can happen in a moment, it doesn't require an event or a book or anything. As you start to realize that change can happen anytime for anybody. So that said, I'm a big fan of New Year's resolutions, Tony Robbins events, like whatever the things are that can be a catalyst for someone. If it's this podcast, like, you want to call me up and I'll just fire you up and you change something, like, great. Whatever the catalyst is great, but you also have the power to do it for yourself at any moment in time that you just decide you're going to make that change. Because that's ultimately what happened with you in those moments with, whether it was drinking or fantasy football. And I think the biggest thing is that sometimes it also doesn't have to be anything big, massive, or crazy. So actually a great book to recommend for this is Atomic Habits. And I think what they really preach there is the first 2-minute rule. So to get unstuck, it's just do the first 2 minutes of whatever that thing is that you're looking to do. So if it's go to the gym more, put your shoes on, walk out the door, start, driving to the gym, you walk in for 2 minutes and then walk right out, but do that every day. And then there's people who then start working out and it becomes a habit. And, that's the thing that gets you unstuck. So a lot of times we make the big goal or the big dream, way too big. And then if we're not doing all of these things, it seems daunting. And then we get discouraged and then we stop action. So break it down to its smallest possible piece. The first 2 minutes, the smallest activity, and just focus on making that little change. So it really doesn't have to be anything different than that. Again, I'm not so great at anything. I just have made a lot of little changes and been very, very consistent over a very long period of time. And that continues to compound. And, sometimes I feel like I need to get pinched because I'm so blessed to be, we're a Forbes company, these great people I work with and great agents, like, it almost feels undeserving, but it really, because these are the only things I've ever focused on, is just small changes every day. And that's something that everybody can do. And again, if you're more interested in that, I think Atomic Habits is a great also catalyst for that.
So good. So good, brother. Ben, thank you for being with us. I really think every member of the audience today is going to take something from this conversation and they're going to run with it. I really appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you. I appreciate having me on. Whoa, yes.
This has been Doing Big Things. I would greatly appreciate you if you could go and rate us on Apple or Spotify so that more people can join the DBT movement. But either way, I just really appreciate you listening, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.